Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 17 of the 10th season of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalog, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Today's episode is a truly awesome conversation that I had with Ivan Anderson, the genius mind behind Cyberattack, who's been on the show before. We talked about his new collaboration EP with Teddy Gold that's out now and that I shared on social media. We chatted about his next Cyberattack album too, and then we got into a really freewheeling conversation about music and creativity and all kinds of things that ventured into so many different areas, from Van Halen to Queen to Guns N' Roses and the enigmatic contradiction that is Axl Rose. Any chance to fanboy to Ivan, I grab with both hands, and this is one of the most interesting and gloriously unfocused, superficially, conversations that I've had on the show. And I left the edit longer because there were multiple times during that edit that I was laughing again at things that Ivan said. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my discussion with Cyberattack.
Tom Petty. Tom Petty Project. Tom Petty. Hey, Tom Petty Project.
Okay, well, should we get into it?
Let's.
Well, let's get into it. We'll get into it because I wanted to talk to you about this. I think you described it as an extremely hyper fizzy ultra pop song with a nice sort of them, which I think is a perfect description. And to me, it's just 2.5 minutes of pure unbridled fun.
Thanks, dude. I'm glad you like that. Yeah, that's those two collaborators are fun people to work with. Teddy Gold is like the singer and the co-writer, and the producer John, who also co-wrote it. They're pals. John found me because I teach Zoom guitar lessons, and I talk about that on some of my YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
And he found me because he wanted to take some Zoom. He found me through YouTube because he was watching my YouTube, whatever. By the way, can I curse on this podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. I need to know early in the conversation whether or not I need to like flick the switch in my brain.
It's all good.
Okay. All right. So he found my YouTube bullshit and then wanted to take Zoom guitar lessons. But he's like already a good musician and a producer. He's like a pro guy in the game who's like done stuff. But he said when he's working with a singer and the whole track is the two of them, sooner or later he's got to get on guitar and play something. And he said he felt like sort of a hack and he just like wanted to take guitar lessons to figure out how to sound like less of a fake guitar player.
Right.
But he like already studied music and was also already working on like pro commercial stuff. So he like knew how to make stuff sound good. So he was like a fun guy to teach because I would just be like, all right, here's how you want to do this part. And then he would be like, oh, so I guess that means I can do this, this, and this. And I'd be like, yep, that'll be $100.
Isn't that cool though? I think that I'm always more impressed by musicians who will do that and say, well, I want to go and learn this or I don't know this, because it shows that recognition of, well, I'm not fully formed yet. There's still some, you know, as a musician, no matter how good you are, there's always something to learn, right?
Yeah. So he was like a fun student because he like already knew how to make music and like he had the right sort of musical priorities and he understood it. And then at a certain point, he was like, listen, I work with Teddy all the time. We feel like you could maybe bring something to some of these songs. You want to get involved. So it was like on multiple levels, best case scenario as a guitar teacher. He was like a fun guy to teach. And then it led to like cool work, you know? And then a song we did together got in an Apple commercial. So that's sort of what you dream about every time you get a new student. Every time I get an email from someone being like, hey, can you teach me guitar on Zoom? I'm like, I hope this leads to an Apple commercial. So yeah, no, they're fun to work with. I mean, they can also produce stuff very quickly. Like we wrote some of those songs in not a lot of time over Zoom.
Right.
We have an EP coming out, by the way. There's like more material.
Okay, good. I was going to ask,
We have an EP coming out called Pixels and Ponies, which was originally like on the first meeting, Teddy was sort of talking about like what she thinks the vibe of the project is. and she just said pixels and ponies. It's like that's like the mood board.
Okay.
And for a while we were thinking of maybe calling the band that. And we went back and forth. We had a debate, and then in the end, we just decided to release it as Teddy and Cyberattack, but we'll call the EP Pixels and Ponies. Anyway, they can work very. It's nice to work with them because I'm not that fast, but they produce songs and ideas very quickly. And it was one of those things where I kind of felt like they didn't really need me to make it sound good. Like without me, they could have written some like cool sounding, very hype. I mean, you can just listen to what Teddy's stuff is like without me. It's like, it's like that. It's cool.
Yeah.
But every time I was like, okay, well, I don't know if it's going to be too crazy, but like we could put like a really fucked up solo in this one. And they'd be like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh, okay, that's allowed. Okay, great. All right.
But it is that thing that you do anyway, though, right? Because you write really hooky pop melodies really, really well. But then you throw these mad guitar solos in, or you'll throw, sort of the glitchier stuff into it that really works. And I think that on Get Into It and Take You There, there's that marriage. It must have been sort of like finding, oh yeah, these are my people. They kind of have the same sensibilities that I have.
Thanks. Yeah, I hope that my stuff is like that. I try to write stuff that's really catchy and sort of likable. And then I try to like to me, my whole process is like, I want to make it as like yummy and likable as possible, like eating candy or something. And then so like I go for that. And then at a certain point, I'm like, oh, but what if this is corny though? Like I tried so hard to make this like yum. Like, what if it just sounds sort of corny and like stupid and syrupy? And then I'm like worried that now I've ruined my own thing with that. So then I'm like, okay, we got to go as far as we can in the other way with like aggressive, noisy, harmful bullshit. And then like the only way I can justify the corny shit is to like hide it with stuff that makes it seem like I truly want to murder the listener, And so I try to make the solo that. I try to make some of the uses of like noise and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, like it's still basically the Nine Inch Nails recipe, I think. Like the Nine Inch Nails singles are like pretty catchy. You know what I mean? Like that guy uses disco beats right and left.
Yeah.
And there's like always this basically like sort of sexual throbbing, like attractive thing happening underneath a Nine Inch Nails song. And then he just puts fake macho bullshit on top of it. You know what I mean? I say this as someone who loves Nine Inch Nails, like top 10 band for me. So that's basically what I'm trying. I basically just ripped off that play. I read an interview once with Trent Reznor where he talked about how one of the songs on the Broken EP was transcribed by Guitar World magazine. And there was a portion of the transcription where it says, "This passage is untranscribable." And he was like, yes, like success.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted. And I like that. I think to myself sometimes like, every time I do something corny, I'm going to try to balance it out by including something that's untranscribable.
Neat. I mean, it's funny that because that's the plague of the artist, right? Is you always look and you're just, oh man, is this good? Is anyone going to listen to this? And I think that contrast, but like what you're saying, the syrup, if you want to call it that, and then the sort of the dirty stuff, that's kind of why it works, because of the contrast between those two elements. It's like when you write a really dark lyric over a really happy, bouncy song, or the inverse of it, right? That contrast between light and shade, it's really important in art, I think.
I agree. I definitely agree. Like Every Breath You Take, like is sort of a very likable commercial pop song, but Sting says he was always a little freaked out by how popular it got. I mean, I'm sure he's pleased with how popular it got, but he says like sometimes people tell me they played that at their wedding and stuff, and he's like, I don't know if that was a good idea.
I don't think you get what that song's about.
Yeah. But yes, I agree. It adds like it gives you more to think about,
Yeah. Well, I will just fanboy just for a second here because you're on the call with me. So I mean, since we were last on the Cyberattack album, I mean, I've listened to that. I probably listen to that album at least once every 2 weeks.
Oh man.
And it's a great album for when I'm walking. That's the start of when I'm walking into work because it just gets me up. Like I'm ready for. But what I love about it too is it's got those sort of 3, 4 really poppy tunes, but then you do sort of it angles off and goes into different places. So I'm really looking forward to whatever's on the horizon. Tell me what's coming up for Cyberattack apart from the collaboration.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much for that comment. I'm glad you like it. I'm really glad. If I can touch one life.
Yeah, well, definitely have. I mean, sincerely, yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah, so I have started the second Cyberattack album. I went out to the guy who produced the first one, Jeff Stanfield, and I've collaborated with him on some other stuff too. He has his own band called Farmer that's very cool that I played on a little bit.
Okay.
We are in the midst of working on Cyberattack album number 2. I went out there and recorded a bunch of stuff. We got this drummer on it named Ted Poor, who is bananas.
Okay.
The drumming on this is incredible. He can really do. There's some like Keith Moon energy where it's like he's like doing stuff that's too crazy to work,
Right.
but he's so good. The craziness is like always actually kind of exactly also perfectly in the pocket too.
Right.
So he brought a really incredible energy to it. There's actually a couple songs that now I'm like I maybe want to redo based on what he brought to the project. Like we showed up, I thought I sort of had the arrangements ready to go. I thought I sort of knew how the songs went, and then he played on everything and it sounded so good that it made me rethink like there's just this high level expert insanity that now I didn't even realize that was like a thing that existed at this level. Like I was like unaware of it previous to watching this guy's performances, and now that I know that exists, part of me is like we might have to like mine that for more. So I'm like a lot of material is established and like the tracks are kind of ready for me to sing on them, but there are a couple that I'm still making up my mind about.
Right.
So that's where the project is. The other thing that happened is I went out to my producer spot in Seattle, and on the plane ride there I got COVID.
Jeez Louise.
So I had to like, I had a bad case too. It was like bad flu. I'd had COVID before this time, but this was the worst time I got it. So
yeah.
I was like trying not to spread it to anybody. So it like, it's like I was like trying to, keep away and wear a mask and like not get it to other people. But the reason I bring this up is that at one point in the process, I woke up and I had blood streaming out of my nose. Like I woke up in the morning and just had this like severe nosebleed, which
Wow.
I didn't know was like a COVID thing.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't
hadn't
know
heard
that was the thing. But I had a nosebleed, and so I woke up in a pool of my own blood, and I realized like I want to put this on the record. I want this to be like on the record, like the blood streaming out of my face, like that level of like senseless violence. I want that to be in there somewhere. You know what I mean? So I was like, this is okay. We're gonna use this. We're gonna just have the blood streaming out of the orifices of my face. We're gonna use that. So I do feel a need to like outdo myself a little bit with some of the guitar solos, and I can say that because most of them are done. There's guitar solos on this record that I think are like beyond anything I've ever done, which I'm excited about.
Cool.
And then here's the last thing. By the end of the week, I had given COVID to my producer. We tried. We tried, but he caught it by the end. So like by the end of our week together, I was starting to feel better and he was starting to feel terrible. And I had been like pounding Dayquil the whole time. I was just like gulping Dayquil to get through the days. And so when he started to feel bad, I was like, well, we got the Dayquil, just take it. And I handed it to him. And it was, you know what Dayquil looks like, right? It's this bright orange, syrupy like gel. It's like bright orange gel that you are supposed to put in your body. And
Also,
he was like,
dangerously tasty. They shouldn't make it that tasty.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I think it tastes great. Yeah. So I handed it to the producer, like, bro, just take the Dayquil. We got it right here. And he looked and he was like, I don't want to take that. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, well, just look at it. It looks like chemicals. Like I don't feel like I should be putting that inside my body. And I was like, yeah, it's chemicals. That's how you know it's good. I was like, they made these chemicals to fix your problem. That's like, it's
Yeah.
medicine chemicals. Don't you know about medicine chemicals? And I realized then that, like, I also kind of wanted that to be on the record. Like there's me and Stanfield, the producer, like we're pals, but I realized then that was like sort of a funny disagreement, that like I'm from New Jersey. I just assume that shit that is like fake and bright orange that they sell at a pharmacy has to be good for me.
Right.
You know, to me, it's just like, yeah, it's just like hair gel. It's also fake, but you just do it. You know,
Yeah.
hair gel, cologne, deodorant. I can't wear deodorant that doesn't have the antiperspirant shit in it, the like aluminum shit. Like I tried it. The deodorant that doesn't have that, it has zero effect on my
It
body.
doesn't
So, like,
deodorize anything.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, it's literally useless. So like I just go through life covered in layers of like chemicals and bullshit. And the record is going to sound like that. Like you're going to hear some fake sounding bullshit on the record. But, you know, the producer is a guy who was like, I don't know how healthy that is.
Right.
And I think that like, I like to think that we got the best of both. Like there were some sounds where he was like, not that one.
Okay.
You know, that sounds too harsh and bad. Not that, you know.
No,
So
because obviously a fan now. It's like, well, I hope the outtakes come out at some point then, because I really need to hear that. So
yeah, I mean there is harsh, crazy bullshit on it, but I think that it's like at a higher level. It's like a better, more musical level because of his input and because of the sort of disagreement between us about like whether Dayquil is okay or not. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, thanks for asking about it. Like I said, the album is well underway. I tried to sort of like keep all the catchiest stuff from the first record,
Yep.
but be more confident and more hardcore and in your face with the cyber hostility part of it.
Right. Cool. So, and obviously that's going to come out on vinyl too, right? Ivan, you're not gonna leave me hanging. This one's coming out on vinyl. You're gonna.
That's what I want to do. My plan is to maybe. I mean, I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, but I would love to sort of join forces with someone this time, like a label of some kind, possibly. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, one role. Well, so I'll put it to you this way: I financed this record with some of my like. Some of the music gear companies that send me stuff for my YouTube channel. There's a company called Mass Distro that represents a bunch of different music gear companies that sends me a lot of gear, and I work with them a lot. There's a guy there named Alex who basically like financed the recording of this record, and I'm using a lot of his gear, but we sort of came up with this like cool collaboration to make YouTube videos and the record together. He like sort of gave me my budget. So in one way, on the recording budget side, that relationship sort of took the role of a label. Like, you know what I mean? I was able to get money to start that way. But when it comes time to actually distribute it and maybe print physical copies and do vinyl, you know, I feel like there's room to collaborate with a label there. I mean, at this point, I'm pretty into the indie way of doing this. I have a YouTube channel. I have a following. I have sort of my own kind of promotional apparatus there. So why do I even need a label at all? And maybe I don't. But I could see, I mean, vinyl is like, you know, there's like hardware costs just to print it, and there's economies of scale there. But I could see doing something like a limited run that is just for the like inner circle of hardcore fans. You know, I could give it away on my Patreon, and it could be sort of like a special small batch thing. Maybe, you know, they're signed or whatever. I don't know. I would love to do like a limited vinyl release that is sort of like a deluxe special thing.
Yeah. Because I mean, like you said, you're the patrons, and I subscribe as a patron because, of course, you're supposed to support musicians. I truly
Thank
believe
you.
that, and
Thank you.
and everyone should go out and listen. I'll put a link in the notes for people to go and support Ivan.
Thank you.
But that's something that I think that's a really good way of doing that, right? Because I know that I've had some friends who've sort of front financed that as well, and sort of said, I'm thinking about doing a limited run. Anyone who wants one, you can sort of get paid for some of it in advance, right? So I think that doing
Yes.
it that way for us, nerdy fans, like that's the way to do it, I think.
I mean, I will say this because I know how much vinyl means to you. So you're gonna like this. I have this like special spreadsheet set up already where it keeps track of the running time of every song.
Yeah.
And helps me figure out if I were to do a side A and a side B, how can I organize it so that the two sides are as close in length as possible. Like
Yeah.
I've already started trying to be crafty about this. And like I want to do 10 songs, and the way I'm thinking about them and like the sort of overall concept of the material is in terms of like two sides.
Yeah.
So and like on a structural level, I literally already have the spreadsheet with the like formulas happening where it's like figuring out song lengths and looking to find the neatest break between side A and side B.
It's so cool because that throws back to that era when that was a primary concern for artists. They had to think about that. I mean, it wasn't sort of a secondary thing that you thought, oh yeah, we should try and. It's like, no, we got to. If you've got like a 7-minute song or an 8-minute song, that's going to limit what else you can put on that side of that album. Rainbow was a great example of that. Dire Straits, I'm sort of super into. And you think about Love Over Gold and Private Investigations. Well, if you got Telegraph Road taking up one whole side, what are we going to do with the other side? It does impact the way you sequence, right?
It definitely does. And I also think like I mean this is going to sound kind of pretentious, but like we're already talking about there's like the syrup level and then the like attack level, like the sweet part and then like the fucked up part. Or there's like the guy who thinks like Dayquil is good and the guy who thinks Dayquil has bad news written all over it. And I feel like a lot of my material does sort of have that going on. It'll be like a major key song, but the lyrics are a little bit ambivalent. You know what I mean? And like most of the music I like, last time we talked about Tom Petty, there was like a lot of this. It was like flirty, but on the edge of tears. That's like Tom Petty sort of mastered that little sweet spot. And I think there is a way that this record, that those two things sort of falls onto the two sides of the album, where like one side is going to be songs that sound happy but are a little bit sad, and the other side could be like songs that sound sad but are like actually a little hopeful.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's going to be that neat, but since I'm still in the final phases of writing all the material, that's sort of what I'm hoping to pull off.
Yeah, just thematically, you can have that a little bit of consistency between two sides. Cool. I wanted to just rewind quickly, though, about something you said, because I always find it interesting when a new musician or a collaborator or a band member changes the way that you sort of either look at your own material or it opens a door to what's possible. And of course, we're going to talk about Tom Petty later on for the Wildflower series that I'm doing. And that's what Ferroni really did, I think, with Wildflowers, is when Ferroni comes in and sits in that chair and brings his very specific groove, it changes the way that Tom's able to sort of wrap the rest of the skin around those bones. So when you get this drummer coming in, and you said like it sort of, it changed the way you're thinking about some of these songs, that must be really invigorating and exciting, where you think, oh man, geez, I didn't even have that possibility. That door wasn't even open for me. So what was that like, sort of having, even, as experienced as a musician as you are, still having that sort of joy of, oh man, that's changed everything now?
Yeah, I mean, I've just felt very fortunate to like benefit from having Ted play drums on my record. I will say that like, I think I'm a good musician, but I think that like one thing that is like not super at my fingertips is like a very high level rhythmic sophistication.
Okay.
That's like I can do it as a guitar player, but it requires like a little extra discipline from me. There are other things that come a little more naturally, and like with my ear too. Like
Right.
my ear's pretty good. Like I can pick out like oh, that's a major 7 sus 2 chord, like whatever. I can hear stuff like that, but knowing that like oh, what he's doing there is he's playing eighth note triplets, but every third eighth note is missing.
Right.
That I don't have the same resolution, or I don't have the same precision in my ability to hear stuff rhythmically. And I mean, I guess I just feel like I know more about chords than I know about rhythms. Or I don't want to say I know more. Or like if you ask me to do something fancy, like this happens as a guitar player a lot. Like I'll come in, I have to play a part. They're like, we want something that kind of like is surprising and takes us to the new level. You
Right.
know, one of my go-tos for something like that is I'll play a chord that's just like stacked fourths. And those, if you know where and when to stick those, it's not even that hard. It's just a certain voicing of a minor 11 chord, and it's like not hard
Right.
to find ways to play a minor 11 chord. But there's like a voicing you can use where it's just a fourth on a fourth on a fourth on a fourth, and people are like, "What the fuck is that? That's amazing!" Like that's something I can do in my sleep.
Yeah.
The rhythmic equivalent of that, I don't know what it would be. Like sticking a 5 on a 4. It's not there. I could sort of figure it out and work on it and do it, but I don't have at the same level of command. Like I have to, I sort of have to like revisit my homework for a second and like finish the homework assignment, and then I can do it.
Well, to me, that's the Toto shuffle, right? It's that exact same thing where you're saying, well, it's kind of, we've heard that before, but not really like that.
Yeah.
And that resolution of like, I can figure out all those parts, but it's like, man, I don't know how you put those together. That's weird. So I think that's more of a comfort thing, though, right? It's just where your natural tendencies lie. Is
Yes.
you can pick the chords out, you can pick the melodies out, but the rhythm is not quite as easily accessible, maybe.
And my ability to like innovate, or like my ability to sort of push things and be like, I'm gonna start the phrase where you're like, I don't know if this is okay, and then I'm gonna end it in a place where you're like, oh, that's more than okay.
Yeah.
That's like a musical trick. You can do that in lots of ways. You can sort of like hit the pitch sideways and then end on the pitch and add the vibrato and have it be perfect, right? You can sort of come in behind the beat and then land on the one and have it be perfect. You can like, play right before there's a key change. You can go to the new key first, and people are like going to be, what the fuck is he doing? And then the key change happens and it's all right. That's like a trick that you can do on many different levels. Rhythmically is the place where it's hardest for me to do that trick. But this drummer can do shit that is just like bananas. Like I'm going to end up repeating myself, but like, he could start a fill where you're just like, where is this taking us? And then he like fills past the one, or he like fills for like an extra bar, but then when it's all over, it's all amazing. And some of it, I mean, I might be wrong about this, but there's some shit on the record that I think he does that like might be untranscribable. Or if it is transcribable, I think it's going to be one of those things where you have to like put the bracket over these notes and say that's like a 5.
Right.
Like there's places where like notation, you sort of break notation where you have to say like, this is a set tuplet.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no way to transcribe it except you then just put parentheses around it and you're like, we're fucked in this part.
Unless you're Vinny Colaiuta, you don't know what's going on there. Just play it.
Right. So this guy sort of reminds me of Vinny Colaiuta, especially like Vinny Colaiuta playing with Jeff Beck or something.
Yeah.
Like where the material is like, it's rock music, but then he's coming in and he can rock. Like that's the other thing about Ted, is that like he understands and loves like when it's time to be a rock band, he can just do it.
Yeah.
He's like not too. There are guys who are weird who like are too fucked up to just be able to rock. Ted's not like that. Like he gets it, but then when it's time to just like get untranscribable, he's ready for it.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like if I wanted a solo to be like that, a non-drum solo to be like that, I think I could do it. And if I wanted there to be sort of like a weird synthesizer sound that is like half cool and half fucked up, I think I could get it for myself. But the one place where I don't think I could ever really come in at the level I would want is behind the drum set. And so I'm just sorry, the last thing I should say, there's a drum solo on the record. That's the other thing. I put a drum solo on the record.
Ooh, okay.
And it's him. And I mean, it's amazing. It's just, I don't want to brag about my own record, but since it's his drum solo, I almost feel like I'm not bragging. It's
You,
just, it's amazing.
you
It's an
should brag about your own
amazing,
record though. I mean, that's you know, bloody musicians you don't want to promote. There's no one else who can do it for you, right? So
yeah. So anyway, I mean, I do feel like, one thing I kind of am proud of is like people have been playing drum solos for like a long time. You know what I mean? Even before rock music,
yeah.
like there were drum solos. And at this point, you might be saying to yourself, like, well, drum solos are fun, but like, how much can you really update the idea of a drum solo? And like, I honestly feel like on my record, I'm making a bid for like there was still room to update the idea of a drum solo. And like,
Wow.
if people disagree, then you can let me have it. But I honestly think the drum solo on my record is like maybe is like bringing the form forward a little bit in terms of
Wow.
what might not have yet been done with a drum solo. I mean that's what
That's
I think.
super
But if
cool.
people disagree, they can let me have it.
It's funny because another it makes me think of another band that we're both huge fans of, Van Halen. It's that rhythmic thing and that sort of, like you said, I like the phrase you put it, like coming at things sideways, which Al Van Halen did a lot. Like he syncopates where you don't need to a lot, and there's the weird shit he does in a lot of that. And, I mean, the count in Jump is
Yes, yes.
ridiculous, all that kind of stuff, right? And it's why when you get to Van Halen 3, and people we're all sort of as fans thinking there's something just slightly off here. I can't put my finger on it. And then when we find out later that, oh yeah, it was because Eddie played the drums on all but probably one track. It's like, okay, well, yeah, there you go. Because you've not got that Al special sauce adding in those little, the ride things that he does under the solo or whatever it is. All those little bits aren't there, and you don't notice them until they aren't there.
All right, there's so much I want to discuss in what you just said. First of all, I agree, and it's interesting to note that like Alex and Eddie Van Halen as two musicians were always like so on the same page. Like a
Yeah.
big part of what made all those other records great is that like they could feel stuff together and had the same sort of intuition about like where the pickup is, how to feel the riff, like
Yeah.
Beautiful Girls, I never hear the one as being where the one is, but they just went for it and owned it. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. And
Yeah.
also it's easy to think that, well, because they were brothers, they shared this kind of nonverbal connection. But then you just have to give Michael Anthony that much more credit for being able to find his spot in between those guys. And he never missed a beat ever.
Yeah.
I mean, the bass always sits perfectly in the groove on those records. And this poor guy had to make sense of these two brothers who could just sort of look at each other and instantly know we're going to do the most bananas thing anyone's ever heard. And then Michael Anthony has to be like, I get it too,
Yeah.
and then it like goes right in. Okay, that being the case, it's almost sort of like they were already the same guy in a way, right? It's almost sort of like Alex and Eddie Van Halen. You could almost think that like each of them was just a separate body for this one larger musical force
Yeah.
that was like instantiated twice. And like one was the guitar playing avatar and one was the drum playing avatar, right? But it's so if you ever go that far and you're like deranged thinking about this, it's then kind of surprising and cool that when Eddie Van Halen just played drums on his own record, it wasn't as good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you can go so far into thinking, well, these brothers kind of had the same musical sensibility, and yet clearly not,
Yeah.
because when Eddie was just his own drummer, I would have thought like years ago that like Alex Van Halen playing drums is like Eddie being his own drummer in a way.
Right.
But the weirdness and the sort of like, it's not quite what you want rhythmic quality of Van Halen 3. I mean, that's one of, I would say, a number of problems on this record, but
Right.
that it sort of goes to show that like, even though they were brothers and they shared something, there was something only Alex had.
Well, and it's that thing that you can run into that tendency if you're a solo artist. I think, Prince mostly avoided it in his career, but if you're doing everything, I think Kravitz suffers from it sometimes, is you don't have that someone saying, really? no, no, no,
Yeah.
let's do it this way. And you know, the friction between the Van Halen brothers was part of what made it work. And the stuff that
Yes.
Al brought that was different was why those songs elevated from being really good hard rock songs to being these genius pastiches, right? I mean, it's that's that level.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then the other thing is that like I just cannot tell you how delighted I was when um I saw that these like two knuckleheads decided to redo Van
Right.
Halen 3. You know what I mean? I saw the article. I check Van Halen news desk every single day. It's like
Yeah.
for me, it's like checking the newspaper. Uh and I see like these two guys try to redo Van Halen 3. I'm like, that's fascinating to me. Like who
Yeah.
like sign me up. Like what the fuck is going on here? And then I start reading, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's my guy. That's my guy who did this. Um so I just think it's hysterical that you did it. I also have to give you special credit because as soon as I knew that this was a thing people tried to do, my first thought is like, well, what did they do with How Many Say I? That's the
Right.
first question that comes into my mind. Because
Yeah.
like, Van Halen, I think Van Halen 3 is like so awful that it's like almost interesting on a philosophical level. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like it's one of these records and I'm gonna pause here. Like the way you guys talk about it is like very respectful, and I know that you guys are saying like we're doing this as fans. We're not trying to disrespect the material. We're not saying we know
Yeah.
better. And I've already seen that like in some of the YouTube comments you've gotten, even the way you respond to those people, you're just like very respectful, very upfront that you guys did this as fans, and the statement that you were making is nothing like we're correcting it. We know better. They fucked up. We're going to
Yeah.
save the day. That's not how you're coming at it. So, and I admire that. I'm not going to be that courteous. I'm going to like talk some shit here as a guy. And I'm going to say that, like, I think Van Halen 3 is like interesting on like the level. It's like when you're a kid and you're like, well, like, I think that like chocolate tastes good and vanilla tastes like shit. But like, what if people who think vanilla tastes good, or like I see blue as blue, but like, what if you see red as red? Like those sorts of things where you're like, well, what if
Right.
what I think every color is different than what every other color? Van Halen 3 is so bad that to me it poses like philosophical problems like that. You know what I mean? It's like it makes you wonder things about like the nature of human sensory experience. Because I'm just like, how did this get out
Yeah.
of the lab?
Yeah.
Like, are they hearing, like, do they just hear shit that's different? You know what I mean? It's like when I
Yeah.
look at someone I think is attractive and someone else doesn't see it, like, it's like shallow Hal type shit. Like, what are other
Right.
people seeing when they see shit that I think is not right? You know?
Yeah.
So, but to me, like, then How Many Say I is the song where it's like I thought the whole record was this sort of weird philosophical thought experiment. Then I get to that song and I'm just like, this is where I'm reduced to like total confusion. Like that song is just so bewildering
Yeah.
and so like to me it's like repellent. Like it's genuinely funny to me. And I know some people are moved by it and like they think that that's like raw and it's like Tom Waits music and it's got a sort of like
But it isn't.
unreconstructed quality that's like, to me the nicest thing you can say about it is that it's like looking at like artwork drawn by insane people or something.
Right.
It's like kind of interesting because you're like, what is the mind that would produce this? You know? And I also think it's funny that like through it all, one of the lyrics is Eddie Van Halen talks about a homeless. Like that kills me. That kills me. That like on top of all its problems, one of its problems is that Eddie Van Halen talks about when you see a homeless.
Talk
So
about,
like,
yeah.
like on top of everything, like that
Yeah.
song has so many fucking things working against it. And then on top of all of it is this like big fat political liability that like doesn't need to be. I mean, he's not even saying anything that terrible. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I mean, it's not, he's like, I mean, I think it's a little condescending, but it just sounds like that's like not how we're supposed to talk anymore. It doesn't sound right to say like, yeah, I crossed the street because there was a homeless. Like,
Yeah. But it also exposes, though, to me, the fact that this is why you need David Lee Roth. This is why you need Sammy Hagar, because clearly Eddie Van Halen is not a lyricist. He just isn't, and the lyrics are really hard to write.
Right. So yeah, I mean, exactly. And also, I want to say, like, you know, I just think using the plight of homeless people to make a point about like compassion or whatever, I think is not as hip as the people who make that sort of move tend to think it is. Like, it's a little bit like when you see like a TikTok video of like, you know, some like really unlikely person playing guitar really well. I'm not even going to fill in the blank, but like there'll be a certain type of person that people aren't used to seeing play guitar very well, and the caption will be like, just goes to show you can never judge a book by its cover. But like, in order to even put that message on the video, it means you already kind of judge the person enough to see that that's not the type of person who should typically be good. So it's you sort of like undermine your own
it's the musical equivalent of, I'm not racist, but you know, any sentence that starts that, you know, it's going nowhere good. And I totally agree. I mean, it's just
right. So whatever the point in How Many Say I is, like, it's actually good to be kind to the homeless. It's just sort of like, we're way ahead of you, dude. Like, I mean, we know the people who already know that are like way ahead. Anyway, it's hysterical to me that like such a bad song now also has this problem. Anyway, so as soon as I was like, okay, these two guys tried to have their way with Van Halen 3, to me, the first thing that I think of is like, well, what do you do about that song? And then when I find out that you guys cut 2 tracks and it wasn't that one, I was fascinated. Kevin, I was fascinated because you guys made cuts, but you didn't cut the song that is like the single most #1 cut song of all songs
ever. Of course.
So I went straight to that and listened to it. And the fact that you guys just cut the lyrics entirely is so good. It's so funny.
But it kind of works as that little, it does kind of work as a little interlude, right? Like
it absolutely, I mean, like, it's funny as a statement, but then even apart from the statement, it actually does kind of work. And then I was thinking, like, how funny would it be if like every instrumental song that ever got released also had the lyrics to How Many Say I cut from it? You know what I mean? Like, how funny would it be if like there was an earlier draft of the Moonlight Sonata in which Beethoven had like crossed out the lyrics of How Many Say I?
A homeless is in there somewhere. A Little Martha by Allman Brothers. Oh man, that's going to live in my head rent free now.
Yeah. So I like the idea that like every other instrumental song that's good like made it to a further level of development where it like transcended How Many Say I.
That's too funny. Holy crap. Okay, well let's circle back. I didn't mean that to go completely into that direction, and thank you for giving any of that a listen, because it was just a little passion thing that you do for fun, right? And the Scott Monroe who brought that to me, we'd sort of just done a couple originally, because the original one is in the And the Podcast Will Rock, which you were a fantastic guest on. Have a Discord community, and I'd done Judgment Day. We'd done some quick edits on Judgment Day. So if you just take out all that crap, this is actually quite a good song. Or no, sorry, no. Oh God, what's it? What's the drum solo that they play? Oh, it's gonna annoy me now. The drum solo song on Fuck.
It's on Balance, right? We're talking about Balance.
No, it's on Fuck. It's that's gonna annoy me.
Isn't it something about like it's a play on time? Isn't the word time?
Pleasure Dome. It's Pleasure Dome. Is what I'm thinking of. Yeah, it's Pleasure Dome. Yeah, and so we sort of edited that out, and so it got from there. And he's like, "Well, should we do a couple for Van Halen 3?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" Because with AI now, you can stem things reasonably well, and that's all I've done really is cut those out. What's really, really funny though, Ivan, is how many people in the comments, if you go look, oh man, yeah, you've made Gary's vocals so much better, or you can really hear but didn't touch any of that. So that's all people just sort of taking on what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So and so we just did it for fun, and then our friend Eric Sanich over at the Van Halen news desk posted it, and shit went crazy. I was like, what the, what is going on here? You know.
Yeah, I love Eric too. That's really good. I had a version of this I wanted to do once, but I never finished it. My version of this, it was also like a long time ago. It was before you could even get the stems from AI. Yeah. My version of it was the last Thin Lizzy record, Thunder and Lightning.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how big a Thin Lizzy fan you are, but if you're not, I feel like you would love that band. That band is like everything you like in bands.
Yeah. Live and Dangerous, even though it's not live and should have just been called Dangerous, is one of the best rock and roll records ever made, as far as I'm
For
concerned.
sure. And that's a band that really sort of combines like a very highly romantic, almost sappy sensibility with like total macho leather jacket 70s tough guy bullshit in a way
Yeah.
that I think is like the best of both.
Well, Phil Lynott is, when you think of a rock star, like I think of Billy Idol, I think of Phil Lynott. Those are the two that I think they're the genuine, real deal. They live it, they love it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, totally. Okay, so their last record, Thunder and Lightning, was produced in this like very trendy 80s metal production style
yeah,
that I think sounds terrible. But the songs I think are cool. And I think actually a lot of those songs have a kind of verve and like fun loving quality that is like missing from the maybe couple Thin Lizzy records before that. Like
right.
songs like Heart Attack, Baby Please Don't Go, Cold Sweat, obviously. Like those songs have a kind of energy that I think is like for the most part missing from Chinatown and Renegades. But I think Thunder and Lightning sounds way worse. To me,
Yeah.
it just sounds like kind of cartoony and like these were ideas that were briefly in vogue in the 80s about how to mix hard rock, and then it just people like snapped out of it.
Yeah.
So I've always wished you could hear Thunder and Lightning produced in a different way. And I, for a while, would go in there and try to re-EQ shit and try to work some magic. I could never get anything that sounded very good.
Yeah.
The next best thing is they have another live album called Live Life that's like a 2 CD set.
Look, I've
It
heard
was
that
from
one.
that tour. It's not as like famous by any means as Live and Dangerous, but they also released an official live album that's like a lot of material. I mean, it's 2 CDs, so I think it was like maybe 4 vinyl records or something.
Okay.
On that tour, and it's got live versions of some of that material, which is a little bit better.
Yeah.
But anyway, all I'm trying to say here is like I tried to do a version of this and I got fed up and impatient. So on a technical side, I also just want to give you some credit because I know a little bit how demanding it can be to do something like this to completion.
Oh, cheers, man. Yeah, but the other one that, but again, another band that we both love is the other album that I think suffers from that same thing, that 80s hard rock malaise, production wise, is The Works by Queen.
Oh, yeah.
Think, oh man, I wish the drums were just, I wish The Works sounded like A Day at the Races. Because I think if The Works sounded like A Day at the Races, it would be a top 5 Queen album straight away.
Yes,
just
I know what you're saying. I mean, it's frustrating too because they had 80s albums that even with the embrace of synth, like I think The Game sounds fine. I think The Game sounds
phenomenal.
great.
Yeah.
And there is some synth on The Game.
Yeah. First album
so
they used
it's
it
like,
on, right? So yeah.
So even that, if they could even have just gone back to that, it would be okay. I don't think we've talked about this. I am pro Hot Space as a Queen fan. I'm pro Hot Space. So to me, like, I even wish The Works was kind of as daring and just like
right.
I mean this in a I don't know if it's okay for me to say this, but one of the things I like about Hot Space is how like fruity it is and like how much they just like shove that in your face. Like there's a very deliberate quality to the like neon like hyper insane coked up gay orgy vibe of Hot Space.
Yeah.
Well,
side one
like,
anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Some of I would like Hot Space more if it was more like if side 2 was more like side 1. Like I don't need what's the song about gun control? Put Out the Fire. Like which sounds like a 70s rock song. And like to me, I was just like, I'll just go to the 70s records for that. Like I want more of Dancer and Staying Power and whatever this new thing is. But then The Works to me is not quite as like intentional. It just sounds trendy.
Yeah. It was, and I think it was an overcorrection back from that, right? Because they got so much pushback against Hot Space. That's like, oh well, let's get back to ground we really, really know. But man, I mean, all my issues with Hot Space are only on the production side. My mate Randy on my Queen podcast said, like, if they'd brought in an actual funk or disco producer, that's album though, that's certainly that first side would have probably been amazing. But it's four guys and Mac who are not really from that world,
Uh,
sort of faking it, right? So you get synth bass where you don't need it. On Dancer is the biggest. I mean, get John Deacon. You've got John Deacon sitting there. Get him playing that amazing bass line. I just think it's automatically 10, 15, 20% better. Anyway,
yeah, okay. I understand what you're saying. I'm okay with it. To me,
yeah,
it's um yeah, I'm okay. I know what you're saying. I get it.
yeah,
I'm okay with it. I mean, to me, the synth bass on Dancer, I just sort of accepted it. It's
yeah,
maybe also because I just live in like a very sort of robotic synth world a lot,
yeah.
you know.
It's also, I mean,
Uh
I grew up with Queen, right? So I literally sort of had heard Date the Races, Night at the Opera, News of the World,
mhm.
Queen 2, like Hot Jazz, all those albums 1,000 times. So when you get to Hot Space and I'm 9 years old, I just don't know what to fucking do with it,
Yeah, for
right?
sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I actually, to me, I think jazz has a kind of weird. You said malaise earlier. I think
Yeah,
jazz on a mixed level is a little out of focus
yeah,
compared to the other great, like, because also didn't jazz immediately came after News of the World, right?
yes,
Yeah, all right. So
which
News of the
sounds
World is like
great.
very in your face. It's just
Yeah,
like it's like right here. It's like so it's like a little more dry, but it's blunt. It's very forward.
yeah,
And then so, to me, whenever I listen to jazz, I feel a little bit like I'm sort of squinting at a photo that's like a little
it's,
farther away than I wish it was.
yeah. And that's the
You know?
general, I think that's the general sense in the Queen fandom of the people who sort of, have a little bit more of a vocabulary for music say the same thing because it's just a bit thin in places and you think, okay, the songs are still really good. And it's that first step into, you can sort of hear the origins of Hot Space on an album with things like Fun It and those kinds of songs. But just sonically, it's like, no, there's no real weight to it. So I don't know.
Uh,
Okay, well, I
yeah.
wanted to, we've talked a little bit about YouTube. Let's talk about YouTube a little bit because you had a pretty big milestone in April on your channel. We hit 1 million views, and I want to just sort of mention to people who might be listening that these days might sound trivial, but it really freaking isn't because it's hard to build a channel where you do have a lot of really hardcore, diehard fans who come and watch all your videos. So I just wanted to talk about how hard you have to work in the YouTube age to build up that kind of following and that kind of presence.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely been a grind. I mean, it's happened to me. I'm grateful, but like people get to higher numbers than I do in less time even than I do.
Right.
One thing that is crucial to it is to like try different types of video formats and then see what doesn't work. You have to be willing to release enough to see what doesn't work
Yeah.
so that then you can shift to doing what does work, and try a bunch of different thumbnails and see what works and try a bunch of different formats and see what works. And it's hard for me to do that. It's hard for me to release stuff where I'm like, this is just a test.
Yeah.
And when I hit like a release, upload, save, whatever, confirm, the button you have to push to make it public.
Yeah.
I never want to think like, if this doesn't do well, that'll be good because then I'll know what not to do. Like that's never the mindset I'm in. I
Yeah.
have to force myself to do that because you need to do that in order to get 1 million views. But if it was just me, every time I get to pushing that button, what I would want to be thinking is like, I've finally reached a point where this is exactly what I wanted it to be. And now I'm ready to show it to everybody. And so I hope they all like it because I know that I do.
Yeah.
Like that's where that when I work on something, I'm working on it to get to that point. I'm working on
Okay.
it to be like, this was fucking hard and it took me a long time and I changed my mind 1 million times, but I spent so much time on it that now I really feel like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And even if I change my mind later, I've spent so much time on this that I know I'm ready now for this to be what it is. And the idea that you might like let go sooner just to learn from the response, I mean, that's valuable, but I have to force myself to think that way.
Yeah. The Edison's light bulb kind of thing. But I think that's interesting too, because your videos and where you sort of do tutorials, that's very, very broad strokes called sort of the guitar pedal stuff, but they're so produced that it's clearly you're not just sitting down with the pedal and saying, hey, this is how you get this tone, this is how you get this tone. There's graphics coming in and there's cuts and there's all these different production elements where clearly you've got to sit down and storyboard that to a certain extent. And I'm sure that you can do that quite quickly now. But that sort of level of production is where it sort of takes your channel and makes it a bit distinct from most of those other things that are in the same type of space, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it sort of goes both ways. Like the people who are my fans are into that, and I think there's like a. I mean, I have a pretty cool following. Like I don't get a lot of annoying comments. Like
Yeah.
the people who watch my stuff seem to get it, and they seem to sort of like um be like a pretty healthy group, I would say. You know, I'm also friends with Emily Hopkins. She plays the harp. She's got a YouTube channel. She's like I mean, she's a musician, but she also does influencer type stuff.
Right.
And like her numbers are a lot higher than mine. So she's just got a lot more people commenting on her stuff. But the level of toxic bullshit she has to deal with is like just awful. And I think most of it is because she's a woman and we just live in a sexist world. But I don't think it's the entire. I don't think my following is just a bunch of awful sexist people who don't subject me to that because I'm not a woman. I'm not subjected to it in general in life because I'm not a woman. But I also think my following is like a pretty cool following that is like appreciates what I'm doing and is ready to sort of get weird and different and is into that. So I appreciate the fact that the following I have is like interested in what I'm actually doing. I mean, I think I'm in a cool spot with that.
Yeah.
But I got there by making these videos very sort of deliberately unusual on purpose.
Right.
And it takes me longer to make them because I have all the animation and stuff. And if I didn't have to do that, I could release videos more quickly. And if I released videos more quickly, my following would be bigger, or at least the numbers would be higher because of how the algorithm works. But I like the fact that like you sort of have to be a fan of my stuff.
Right.
I don't mean that in a snobby way or like a gatekeeper way. I just mean that like the type of people who make it to the end of one of my videos are the sort of people who are going to like the rest of my videos. And I think there's like a sort of a built-in quality to that takes me longer, but I'm glad to have the following I have.
But I think that comes too, though, from you're not, like you said, I mean, obviously when you're publishing and when you're sort of monetizing YouTube, you do have to have one eye on that kind of stuff. But what comes through in your channel is it's you. It's authentically you. You know, when I talk to you on a podcast here, or if we were sitting in a coffee shop, or if you're on your YouTube channel, it's the same person. I'm not getting this varnished. I'm getting you. I'm getting the truth, I think is what I'm getting to, right?
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I tried to make the YouTube videos, basically all of them are I still think of like my albums as like the real thing.
Right.
Like the first album that I put out, the one I'm working on now, I still sort of think of that as like what it's all for. And so I try to make the YouTube videos where I'm talking about music gear almost like previews for what my real work is going to sound like and what the music videos are going to look like and what the real party is going to consist of when you make it to the real party. And the real party is going to be like listening to the next album.
The Cyberattack extended universe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I'm trying to make it feel like that's perfect. Yeah. But thanks, man. Yeah, it felt good to get to 1 million. I'm always trying to get faster and better at making my animations and making my weird looking stuff so that I can put videos out more. I'm always trying to force myself to be less of a perfectionist. I'm never going to be not a perfectionist.
Yeah.
But I do think that the more I can force myself not to be, the more successful I get in general. You know,
is that perfection is the enemy of what is it? Perfection is the enemy of completion or something like that. That's the old adage.
Something like that. And I mean, the more you release, the more you sort of learn about what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, like there's already stuff. When I first put the first album out, I was like, this is unimprovable. It's not that I think I've made the greatest album that anyone has ever made. It's just that like I've made everything on this as good as I know how to make anything. Like
Right.
there's nowhere is there a screw that I'm strong enough to turn at this point. They've all
Right.
been torque wrenched to maximum. And I no longer think that when I listen to the first record.
Okay.
You know, there's all kinds of stuff where I'm like, oof, how did I not know about that fucking issue right there? You know, but I never would have gotten there unless I'd released the first one. So sooner or later, you can't, you know, if you hold everything in to make it perfect, you'll never actually get to your best work. But
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's the Chinese democracy thing, right? I mean, you can keep going in and re-recording it, but you end up at a point where you've made it a million times bloody worse. So I think, and I like that. I like that. But that snapshot in time, I think, is important for artists too, right? That's where I was then. You know,
yes.
you look back and you think, well, I can play it better now, or I might chop this off, or I would do that differently. But it's a really important part of, well, that's exactly who I was at that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Chinese democracy to me it's another one of these like records where the issues are so confusing and it's like bad in such a bizarre way that it's like interesting to think about how bad it is. And there are some songs that have certain things that I kind of like. Like
Right.
I don't Chinese democracy has problems, but I have sort of a soft spot for it
Right.
personally. Like I like it more than like Slash's Snake Pit, for instance,
Okay.
which is like sort of harder to criticize. It sounds fine, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
But it's
it's also
risk-free.
it's risk-free, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Like to me, like I think Chinese democracy, there's like songs on it that I can kind of dig, or
Right.
there's parts of songs I can dig. Like I can do Chinese democracy more than I can do Van Halen 3, for instance.
I just think, I mean, for me, it's, and I don't know, I never know where anyone else stands because I definitely don't get into the Guns N' Roses fandom because I always think that they're probably not the same people as me. But as soon as Izzy left, it's like, well, you've kind of lost the genius brain bit that you needed. That again, that contrast, you need someone saying, nah, Axl, you know, you don't need that extended, you don't, yeah, no, how about we do it this way? You don't have that other person, that other really great creative mind, that check and balance that you need in any great sort of creative endeavor, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Axl Rose, he's like I saw Guns N' Roses last summer at MetLife.
Okay.
And the thing that was the most surprising to me about it is how much they've a little bit become kind of just like the classic rock review experience.
Right.
You know, where like there's a say, I mean, I know Axl Rose has always kind of had a soft spot for like Elton John or like the version of Queen that is sort of just like a Freddie song that's like piano based drums. The thing, Brian May is a top 10 guitar player of all time for me, but it's kind of cool how much Queen could have worked as a piano trio.
Yeah. Easy.
You know?
Yeah.
And Axl Rose has always clearly also had a soft spot for that kind of like balladeer.
Right.
You know, which is like very much at odds with the like antisocial Axl Rose who just wants to like make you hate him, you know. But it was weird to me how much like when I saw Guns N' Roses at MetLife, I was like, I haven't checked in with this band in a while, and I don't know what all the different chemicals, what levels are they at? Like the sort of, this is the scariest band of all time that is like a moral panic that is going to corrupt our youth. How much of that are we still working with? And the sort of like kind of dull classic rock band that is going to cover Bob Dylan and Paul McCartney and the Rolling Stones and churn out these like 7-minute cover versions that are kind of just jammy, which to me, you know, I'm talking about like the version of Knocking on Heaven's Door. That's like one of the most safest, non-toxic decisions a rock band could ever make.
Yeah.
Right. Like how much of that are we, you know? And like people brought their kids to MetLife to see Guns N' Roses, and it was like not that weird.
Yeah.
You know, there's a version of Guns N' Roses where it's like you probably can't bring a kid to this. Oh, but then they come out and they opened with It's So Easy. That was the first song they played.
Wow.
So like the concert starts with It's So Easy, and I'm like, holy shit, ladies and gentlemen, like I think we might have some like dynamite on our hands here. Like I think this band might be here to fuck shit up, and like you know, I think we might have to like cover up some of these kids' ears. And then it's like 2.5 hours later, they've like covered all these classic rock songs. They've like extended all the songs so they can have like extra guitar solos. Axl Rose is like at the piano, but they've got Dizzy Reed at the piano. It's like it was way more about like the Las Vegas classic rock band presentation than it was about like, you know, a band that named its first album Appetite for Destruction, and the original album art was like so fucked up that it got censored.
Yeah.
And so then the like less fucked up version was just the guys as skulls, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like not the most PG band you've ever heard about in your life. So I a little bit I just, it felt I couldn't, I didn't totally know like what I was supposed to decide about what kind of band Guns N' Roses is. Like if you see Slayer, like I heard Tom Araya of Slayer once say that like Slayer is for people who's, what did he say? If your life is together, you're probably not going to like Slayer.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like this music is for shit that is like not okay. You know what I mean? Like you don't come home from like the best day of your life and it was like your daughter's first communion and like the family was all together and she made you real proud and you know it's like you finally made peace with, you know, your dad and everything else, and then you go home and put on Angel of Death. Like that's not what that music is for. You know what I'm saying? But like if you see Slayer, you get that that's what they're giving you. Like they're just on, but they stay on message. That's what you would say about the politician. Right? He does a good job of staying on message. Slayer stays on message. When I saw Guns N' Roses, I was like, what is the message anymore? Are they just a rock band? The way like I like Aerosmith too, but like they're just a rock band. You know what I mean? Is Guns N' Roses just a rock band?
They transition to that legacy act, right? That's what they are. It's the same as Kiss. It's Bon Jovi, Def Leppard. You can sort of plug and play, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So to me, there was like, I like all those bands, and I don't have a problem with bands that are that. But to me, the most interesting thing about Guns N' Roses is that like they did at one point release Chinese Democracy. You know what I mean? There's no record that sounds like that in Def Leppard's discography or Bon Jovi's discography or Aerosmith. Like nobody else was ever so fucking out of control that they released Chinese Democracy. So since we're talking about a band that did that, I was just like, have you just been completely tranquilized? Like that's just, there's no trace of that anymore.
Do you think some of that comes from, and I mean, I've got one last thing I wanted to just kind of talk to you about before we wrap this part of the chat up is, do you think that some of that comes from, and I don't always buy into, you know, art is pain and that kind of stuff, because you can create good art from a place where you are comfortable, I think. But to do what GNR were doing on Appetite, and they almost started to lose it a little bit into illusion in some places, like because there's a lot of bloat there and a lot of excess.
A lot of bloat.
But you need that. Do you think that you need that sort of hardship where someone's on drugs or someone's struggling? Or do you think that you need that edge to be able to present that and be that version of that band on stage?
You know, I don't know. I mean, on some level, the most interesting thing to me about Axl Rose is that I don't know. I don't totally know what's going on with this guy. Slash, even though in some ways Slash is more mysterious because he like never takes the sunglasses off and he's always got the hat and the look and he's like always the mysterious guy. He's like less mysterious to me because he's just sort of like so quintessentially a rock and roll guitar player dude.
The blues.
I mean, I love Slash, you know, but he just like he like typifies the role there, you know. Whereas like Axl Rose is more complicated and he's more androgynous. I mean, there's like those pictures of him on the cover of Rolling Stone with his shirt off in the 90s. He's like beautiful the way that only women are beautiful.
Right.
Like that's like fucked up for me to say, I guess.
No,
but like,
I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you just look at the shirtless sepia tone photograph of Axl Rose on the cover of Rolling Stone. There's just like a feminine energy mixed in there. It's just there. Like if you can't see it, okay, that's your issue. But like the Axl Rose contains all these contradictions, and like I honestly just don't know what to make of it. Like the guy who wrote Sweet Child of Mine also wrote My World. You remember My World, the last song on User Illusion 2? I mean, My World is like the sonic equivalent of like a boundary violation. You know what I mean? It just sounds like harm is being done to you when you listen to that song.
Yeah.
You know, and yet this dude can like create beautiful things.
Yeah.
You know, so I've never known how to summarize Axl Rose, and I don't know like the part of him that creates stuff that I think is beautiful and great. I don't know if that's like 51% of Axl Rose or like 99% of Axl Rose.
Yeah.
You know, I've never felt like I know really. And then Chinese Democracy came out and it was like, okay, you know, this guy lost his grip a little bit, but he also did release it.
Yeah.
You know, he got it together to put it out. And like, I mean, that record has problems, but it's not trying to be normal, you know?
Yeah. And
Uh,
it's and it again, it's sort of at that point after all that time, and without Slash and without the you know, but basically GNR, it's a bit of a risk to put that out
oh,
and sort
totally,
of and have that
totally.
and have the industry turn around and say, dude, really, what the you know? So there's because you know, I mean, Axel's got an ego. I'm sure I think he
Uh-huh.
seems like he's mellowed out a bit in the last sort of decade or so. And you see him on Twitter and he's really funny and whatnot. But he's still Axl Rose. So if he releases an album and it bombs, that's not going to be good, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting to me that like he rarely tweets, right? He like tweets like
Yeah.
once a year.
Yeah.
And when he does tweet, most of his tweet, I mean, maybe this has changed, but like there was a point where most of his tweets were just him being critical of Donald Trump. And this is also completely fascinating to me.
Yeah.
That like this guy who never has anything to say on Twitter, but when he does have something to say, the thing that's so important he's going to say it is he goes after Donald Trump. Now, I'm no fan of Donald Trump myself, so I'm not complaining about it, but I would not have guessed that
Yeah.
like, I mean, first of all, let's just review a little bit. Like Axl Rose himself has been accused of having many of the same prejudices that Donald Trump has because he released a song where he says lots of bad words.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like every year people talk about like, will there be a tape released where Donald Trump says the N-word? And could that finally end his campaign? Omarosa said she heard that there was a tape where he says the N-word. Will the tape ever see the light of day? And if it does, will it ruin Donald? Like Axl Rose made the tape and released it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
On a
It's
major
called,
label.
Like 1 in a million. You
Yeah.
could
On
look
a
it up
major
right
label.
now.
Yeah.
You know? And then all the other stuff, like many people have defended Axl Rose on the grounds that like, well, maybe you don't like 1 in a million, but at least we've got this guy telling us how he really feels.
Yeah.
You know, and there is all the people that say there's something attractive about having a guy who doesn't give a fuck, who's willing to be sort of vulgar, who's willing to just kind of like shove it in people's face and be hostile just for the sake of hostility. Like the song Out to Get Me, where he's like, I'm fucking innocent.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't sound like you're innocent, but there is something sort of sexy about a guy who's just going to be a badass and use curse words for the sake of using curse words.
Yeah.
All of that energy is used to defend Donald Trump from people who are like, maybe I don't agree with the policies, but I kind of like the way he pushes the envelope.
Yeah.
I don't really buy it when it comes to Donald Trump, but there's a very similar style of defense that has been used to Axl Rose's credit for decades, you know?
Yeah.
And then lastly, when I saw them at MetLife, the Pretenders opened for them, which I thought was cool. And
No
I
way.
Thought, yeah, the Pretenders opened.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, I took that as like, I mean, I like the Pretenders, but
Yeah.
also I was like, this gives me hope that the sort of like androgynous, highly melodic, surprisingly beautiful side of Axl Rose is maybe gaining the upper hand in the war for his soul.
Yeah.
You know, but then in between the Pretenders and Axl Rose, they were like, since we're here near New York, we've got a very special guest. An old friend of the band is going to drop in and say hi. And Andrew Dice Clay comes out and did like 25 minutes.
Oh my God.
Now, like, yeah. And I was like, okay, never mind what I was saying before about like maybe the feminine side of Axl Rose has got the upper hand. Never mind. Now, I personally don't think Andrew Dice Clay is that funny. There's like other people who are politically in the same spot that can make me laugh. Andrew Dice Clay he honestly reminds me of Tim Heidecker's parody stand up when Tim Heidecker like does an impression of what like hacky, sort of middle of the road stand up comedians do. Like that's to me what I thought Andrew Dice Clay was like. But here again, like if you do think Andrew Dice Clay is funny, I bet a lot of it has to do with the idea that this guy's sort of firing back at these forces of political correctness that are telling you how you're supposed to think and telling you who you're supposed to let go first and telling you who's picked on and who's not picked on. And you're sick of hearing about it. And here's a guy who's going to like subject those forces to the ridicule they deserve.
Yeah.
All I'm trying to say here is like that style of thought to me seems integral to what Donald Trump represents politically.
Yeah.
So it actually like does not make sense to me that Axl Rose is critical of Donald Trump on Twitter. It's just another one of these things that makes me think like I fundamentally do not understand what's going on inside Axl Rose's mind. Like my picture of who this guy is and what I think I understand consistent. About this guy, there's like, I'm missing crucial pieces of information here because like, it just does not make sense to me that he hates Donald Trump. I love it, but it's like funny and weird to me that he hates him.
Yeah. I think provocation's fine as long as there's intentionality behind it. It's when you, like I said, when you're doing one thing with one hand and then saying something else with the other, but they contradict. If you're not reconciling those deliberately, I think that's where you're getting into a stage. Well, no, you are just saying shit for the sake of saying shit, and at that point, I'm just like, well, then that's just another idiot, and I don't care that much, you know?
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, to me, I felt like with Andrew Dice Clay, like it's just gross. To me, it's like it reminded me of like a song like My World. Like I like Guns N' Roses songs, but the song My World to me really only has one feature, and it's just it's gross.
Yeah,
like, that's just all it is. It's just gross.
It's great that it's the last track because you can just lift the needle and walk away, right?
Right. So anyway, I don't really know. I can never actually account for any of it. But as a Guns N' Roses, I mean, let me say, first of all, I'm a Guns N' Roses fan because I do think their good material is incredible. And I love listening to that music. And I just, on a musical level, I just love it. Second to that, they continue to be sort of like mystifying to me, and like exactly what is going on in the war for Axl Rose's soul continues to be bewildering to me, and I honestly feel like I don't really have the answers.
I love it. Well, like you said, we're missing bits and pieces of the backstory of what brought Axl Rose here, but I wanted to close this segment by talking to you about a video that you posted, and it sort of throws back a little bit to you saying that sometimes you just throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks. But we did get a little bit of backstory on your creative origins with your Mortal Kombat video, which I loved. It was like I totally get this guy. I mean, I already did anyway, but like I was a gamer growing up. I was a little nerdy kid who played all those 8-bit games and everything. I didn't play Mortal Kombat, but I played a similar one called, it was called like Land of the Rising Sun or something. Problematic, you know, in terms of sort of culturally. But getting into that, there's a bit in that video that you put up where you talk about this finishing move, and it's a 2-part finishing move for Sub-Zero, I think is the character. And so you freeze him and then you uppercut him, but if you don't get it right, it doesn't do the finishing move. And what I like is you've got a little arrow that points to him and says, "Did not explode." And that just made me laugh so hard.
Nice. I'm glad you like that video. I like that video too. That one was like, in some ways, that was a test because I was talking about not my usual subject. And, you know, it didn't do as well as like my usual formats. And part of me feels like I just need to continue to post videos that are outside my usual format. I could do more stuff like that, but the first new video of a new kind is rarely the one that'll do the best. So if you're gonna have like, now I'm a guy who talks about this, the first time you talk about the new thing often does not then become the biggest hit you'll ever have when you talk about the new thing. You got to like establish it and then do more. And then the 4th or 5th or 6th video, you'll like find the subject in that new area that really makes your numbers go up. And so part of me was like always frustrated by stuff like that because I worked on the Mortal Kombat video as if that was gonna be it. I put that video up being like, okay, I'm ready for my close up. Right. Like I was saying before, anytime I do anything, I'm like, I'm ready for my close up. If this is the thing, if this is the one that gets 1 million views in 20 minutes, I'll be ready for it to be this one. It didn't get 1 million views in 20 minutes. If I stuck with formats where I talk about that, someday I'll get there. But that we were talking before about how it's like hard for me to release a test. That was in some ways a test. I still labored over it and got sort of stuck being a perfectionist to a certain point, and probably spent a little too much time on it. Even saying all that video was like a sort of a different format, and it was a sort of a test. I'd like to do more stuff like that where I'm talking about stuff on a more general artistic level.
Let's wrap up this half, Ivan, and half, or probably a little bit over half. Tell people where they can find you, what's coming up, what they should look out for.
Okay, yeah. So I release everything under the name Cyberattack. I have a website called CyberattackWorld that is like basically just links to all my stuff. My main thing is the YouTube channel. And even though I release original music, it also gets released on my YouTube channel too. So if you want to listen to my stuff and my stuff with Teddy and John, it's on Spotify. The name is Cyberattack. But you can sort of see everything I'm doing, including the music, on my YouTube channel. If you just search for Cyberattack on YouTube, you should find me. If you get a bunch of cybersecurity stuff, just search Cyberattack music, and then you'll see my glitchy face.
And there'll be lots of links in the episode notes below, so go check that out. Well, thanks so much for jumping on for us again. That's been a wide-ranging, freewheeling chat that I've absolutely adored. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, that was great, dude. That was great.